Well, welcome everyone. I'm Billy Riggs, professor of management at the University of San Francisco, and this is our annual Autonomous Vehicles and the City Conference, and we have an amazing agenda. We aren't able to be in person again this year, but we've got our most international event that we've ever had, and excited to have you all attend and watch and be partners with us in this. And without further ado, I want to introduce our dean,
Recording
Dean Charles
in progress.
Moses, who is just an inspiring individual, and we could not be more excited to have him kind of introduce our event today. Turning it over to you, Charles.
Thanks, Billy, and I want to welcome everyone to the 5th Annual Autonomous Vehicles in the City Symposium. I'm Dean Charles Moses, and I couldn't be prouder to have the University of San Francisco School of Management host this event featuring innovative cities and companies who are exploring automated solutions for the future of sustainable and socially just cities. This event is highly aligned with what the School of Management focuses on. Our mission is not only to focus on strategic management, entrepreneurship, and innovation, but also on serving the most vulnerable and addressing systemic issues like social injustice and climate change. We are currently at a unique inflection point as we try to address those issues, and as we can see from the proceedings in Glasgow at COP 26, it is in that light that important that we find space for collaboration and partnership between public and private sector entities to innovate our world for good. This event is one of the places that provides that space. I want to thank Dr. Riggs for continuing to lead this important initiative as a thought leader in this important area. And I want to also thank the broader campus, national and international community that we have gathered together to discuss this important issue. Thanks in advance to all our speakers and our sponsors. And without further ado, I'm going to give this back to Dr. Riggs, who will run through our proceedings. Billy?
Thanks, Charles. It was very generous, and I cannot reiterate enough how grateful we are to our speakers today, but also to the generous sponsors we have. We have some legacy gifts from Cruise, Waymo, and Planetizen that really made today happen. But this year we have a flagship sponsor that's doing some unique stuff in the climate banking sector. We have Atmos Financial, who really entered into a unique partnership with us to make this event happen. We hope that you've checked them out, but to do a little quick intro before we get to our proceedings today, I want to hand it to Pete Helbig, who's the Chief Operating Officer and a co-founder. Pete, unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about Atmos, and thanks for partnering with us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Billy, and thank you for everyone participating here today. We're excited to be a part of this conversation. As Billy said, my name is Pete Helwig. I'm co-founder of Atmos. For those of you that don't know us, Atmos is the world's most climate positive banking platform. 100% of all deposits placed with Atmos fund climate positive infrastructure to accelerate the transition to the clean economy. Our digital banking products provide nationally leading yields and rewards, market leading technology, all while funding our shared vision of a more resilient, transformed world. I hope you all take a few minutes to learn more at joinatmos.com and consider taking this action to help reverse global warming. And signing up through the custom link on the registration form will generate a $10 donation for the USF AV initiative and $10 for yourself. Not a huge amount of money, but still there. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Billy. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe one or two burritos on the burrito scale. So thank you, Pete, and I really appreciate the generosity that you've shown, but also the potential for impact. It's very aligned with where we're going, and I think what you will see today is that there's a lot of innovation in this space, but at the end of the day, we hope to create space where we can partner and really pay for some of these innovations, and that's why I find the idea of innovating finance alongside the way we innovate mobility to be really provocative. So in terms of our run of show, I really first want to introduce Hillary Nixon, who is the co-executive director of the Mineta Transportation Institute. Mineta has been a partner with this event for a long time. I've asked Hillary to be my thought partner for today, to tell me when I'm wrong, challenge me when I'm right, and really just provide a little construct for us to think about as we think about automation, cities, mobility, and like I said, how we pay for all this. Hillary, maybe you can provide some introductory thoughts, and then we'll get started with hearing from the incredible speakers we have today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Billy, so very much, and to USF for hosting this symposium for so many years. I am just delighted to be here. Very excited for this year's lineup of speakers. The Mineta Transportation Institute is a university transportation center at San Jose State University. At MTI, our work focuses on increasing mobility of people and goods by improving the accessibility, efficiency, equity, safety, and sustainability of our nation's transportation system. Our researchers working on AVs look at both the technology, but especially the planning and policy aspects related to AVs. Sustainability and social justice concerns underlie much of what we do at the Institute. I wanted to take a moment to frame today's symposium by posing a couple of questions for all of us to consider as we're listening to our speakers engaging in a robust Q&A. First, how can we advance social equity in an autonomous vehicle world? The implementation model and approach to pricing we pursue need to be purposefully considered to ensure that we aren't leaving segments of the population behind, and that the technological advances serve to close the mobility and accessibility gap, not widen it. Second, how can autonomous mobility be a catalyst for achieving sustainability in the transportation sector? We know the large contributions of the transportation sector to greenhouse gas emissions, and there's certainly the expectation that the autonomous vehicles will be electric with zero operating emissions, but there's far more to consider in terms of the potential environmental impact. There's the source of electricity generation, or the possibility that an autonomous mobility future may lead to increased vehicle miles traveled and more wear and tear on the physical infrastructure. These aren't insurmountable challenges, but they need thoughtful, proactive, and collaborative approaches to develop the right solutions. Billy, turning it back to you to introduce our first speaker.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. I really appreciated that framing, and it really gets at, I think, the assertive place that we want to reside here to bring public and private sector entities together for positive and impactful change on our cities. We have a really fascinating lineup that touches on business models for automated and new forms of mobility, as well as automated driving. And that includes, first, a really unique speaker, Henriette Cornett, who's working on a fantastic project that's funded by the European Commission. Then we hear from Justin Cote, who leads a company that's really focused on mobility as a service and innovating that space. We'll hear from Eli Metchuk with the Volpe Center on many of the experiments they're looking at in automated driving. And then finally from Sahasrata, who has a new platform that really enables not only automation, but mobility as a service solutions for the car, and his company is called Smart Car. And so we have this crazy innovation ecosystem right now, and I could not be more excited to start off with Henriette, who leads the show project, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about that and about this amazing European Commission project that he's working on. So without further ado, from Belgium, thank you very much for being here, Henriette.
Hello, Billy. I'm very glad to be here with you today. As you can see from my background, it's already dark here, so it's already evening. I'm very happy to present the project today, and for that I will share my screen. Up. Okay, I hope you can see it. I hope everything works well. I will just go on and interrupt me if something doesn't work technically. Okay, so a word about me. I'm Henriette Cornet. I work at UITP. UITP is the International Association of Public Transport. I am coordinating activity at UITP in the field of SICAM. SICAM is a word that we use quite much in with the European Commission when we are working with them. It means connected and cooperative automated mobility. So it's all this field of automated mobility. I'm coordinating activities related to that within the association. And I'm also the project coordinator of SHOW, which I will present you now. I will be brief because it's a very large project and I could speak about it during hours, but in short, SHOW stands for Shared Automation Operating Models for Worldwide Adoption. It's all about deploying AVs, like shared AVs, like something very important. And I guess coming already to what to the introductions that Hilary made, we come to this social equity aspect that's very important for UITP, being an association for public transport, that we integrate automated mobility within public transport, within shared mobility, and not as individual a product, I would say. But back to the project, SHOW is for this shared mobility, and it's also for cities or like peri-urban areas. The project is very unique in Europe right now because it gathers 70 partners. You heard it right, it's 70 partners for a project. It's really huge, and for coordination, it's a challenge, but it's also a great opportunity because we are covering the entire ecosystem of automated shared mobility in Europe, meaning we have public transport authorities, public transport operators, we have a service industry, technology providers, big players, big European players like Siemens, Bosch are on board of the project. We have many research institutes. We have associations like UITP, we have consultants and so on. So we can collect really the requirements, the needs from all these stakeholders and put everything together in this 4-year project. We are now in the middle of it, approaching half of the project. And our goal is to start the urban demo next year. So stay tuned with the project, with me also, because next year things will really go on the road. And as Billy mentioned already, we are funding by the European Commission with 30 million euros. Just some keywords here. So it's about deploying high level of automation AVs, so around 70 vehicles for passenger, but also we will have some use cases targeting cargo for like mixed transport. We will investigate different type of infrastructure, having dedicated lanes or mixed traffic and different range of supporting infrastructure of with 5G, IoT, and so on. We are also trying to push really the boundaries of development so that, and also of deployment, so that we can reach higher traffic speed. From the work structure, here you can, I will not go into detail, but it's just to show you, you see a lot of buzzwords, I would say. You see the business models that have been mentioned also, our use cases, the ethical issues that are very important for the European Commission. There's a lot of work ongoing there. Our system architecture that we are developing for all the exchange of data that will happen for the different actors that put these AVs into the game, into the public transport traffic management system. We have a lot of tools that we need to make everything work. And at the end, we have here at the core, finally, the real life demonstrations that I mentioned before that will start next year. But for this, we need also impact assessment, simulation models, and so on. So we are kind of targeting everything. That's why we have so many people on board, and that's what we are doing. Here, a view how it looks like from a European perspective. So I mentioned the 70 automated vehicles that we want to deploy. You see on the bottom the type of vehicles that we are targeting. Yes, you see private cars, but these are meant to be used still as shared mobility, meaning as robotaxi or as car sharing. And we have also the shuttles that all of you know, I'm sure. And we have also retrofitted public buses. our demonstration plan, just again to tell you that next year things will get real on road, on real life in the city with real passenger. And what is unique also in the project is that this demonstration will last for a long time. So it's at least per site 9 months, around 9 months, meaning we can gather a lot of learnings, a lot of insights. And the idea is really to be part of the everyday life of the citizen. And it will enable us to really see if the business models are viable, if the service is really actually providing usefulness for the citizen. We have some insights online. I don't go through it. You can read, and you can see also the website address. It's quite easy to if you just type show EU project, you will find it on Google, and you can see many deliverables that we have already submitted and that have been already approved by the European Commission. So have a look there. And just a word before closing my presentation, I want to mention that we have twinning activities and international cooperation in show, because we want to go beyond the European borders. That's why I'm very happy to be with you today and to speak to you. I'm sure there is many people from US today with us, but also possibly from the entire world. So have a look. We are targeting some twinning actions to really mutualize the different demonstrations that are happening all over the world with our project, so that we are sure that we move all in a good direction together. We have targeting countries, but that you can read: US, Singapore, Taiwan, Australia, China, and South Korea. But it's not restrictive to these countries, of course. So meaning if you are listening to me, and you are not from one of these countries, but you have a great demonstration of autonomous shared vehicle happening, just get in touch. We are very interested. And the idea for this is really to cooperate on exchanges, lessons learned and best practices. But why not also going into more detail and work on the AV driving behavior, on the V2X communication, regulations is also a big topic that we have in the project, business models, and so on. We could even think of joint demonstration, and for this we have really the full support from the European Commission. Here is how it looks like from the Asia Pacific region. So we have collaboration in China happening already, also in Taiwan, also in Japan and in Australia. I will say a word about Japan just to close my presentation, but here about US, because I'm sure many of you are based in the US. It's also directly supported by the European Commission. There are people, they put people really to create this link. We had interaction already with AASHTO and with the Texas Transportation Institute. And we are really interested into connecting with DOT-funded project on this shared automated mobility. So this is ongoing, and I hope that by the next presentations that I will give, I can give you more detail about some cooperation happening. The benefit of twinning is, if you join the show project, if you interact with us, if you collaborate with us, you will interact with the biggest and most holistic ever initiative. So yes, it sounds a bit like very ambitious from our side, but it's the case now. It's really the biggest project in Europe in terms of partners and numbers of vehicles and so on. And you can get in touch with European key players, be part of internal discussions, because you can also connect with Japan, Australia through our project, and showcase your national strategy. Here it's an example of Japan, because we signed very recently a memorandum of understanding with ITS Japan and the University of Tokyo, because they started a new project called Cool4. And to give you an example, we will collaborate there on topic of vehicle behavior at intersection, safety remote supervision and control, how the safety is from remote supervision, on regulations for AV user acceptance. I know you cannot click on the link, but I hope the slides will be shared and you can get more information from the website on this collaboration, and it can give you idea how to interact with us. More about show. Also, we have a nice video on YouTube, social media, the website, everything. And if it's not enough, get in touch with me. I will be super happy to exchange with you and to see how we can collaborate on this very exciting topic. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Henriette. That was incredible. And so the first time I met Henriette, was about 4 years ago in Munich, and I still do not know how she does everything she does. Because I think my first question is 70 groups. I mean, how did you structure that? It seems like a lot of people to bring together. I mean, how do you bring that many people or that many groups around a singular vision? How did that happen?
Yes, that's really the core of the project. And as I mentioned before, it's both this challenge and opportunity. So from a coordination is challenging because each time I send an email to the consortium is like 450 person, something like that involved. So that's a lot of people behind the project working on it. But on the other side, you need to have this mindset really to see that what is the interest of each type of partner. So of course we have industries, they have business models, they have their own interest. And you have, for example, academia, they want to publish papers. You have all this type of different interests working in the project, but knowing them, and because of my background, because I work in both industry and academia, I guess it helped a bit because I can speak these different languages. So you can really create synergies between these different groups so that at the end everyone benefit from it and everyone can exchange on this topic.
Yeah, it's funny. You meant literally different languages, but also you can speak the language of business and academia and the private sector, which I think is really important thing to highlight. So I think one of the things that is really interesting, also in that I spoke with one of our colleagues, Tom Elcom from the European Commission about earlier this week, is that a lot of these projects are providing that space for collaboration and that space for perhaps brokering some of these things where there's a safe space for a private sector company to take some risks, but also for the government to experiment. So, I mean, I think, one thing I'd ask you is that, how is the EU, market different than the US? And are there things that, as you look at what we're doing in the US that we can do to accelerate innovation in a way that builds both the business model, but also the business models for automation, but also preserves the policy side and all the benefits to cities that we want to achieve?
Yeah, I think you mean what makes Europe special, right? This type of project like in Europe. Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And being part of different conversation with Asia, with US, I noticed that in Europe, we have this strong focus. For example, we have the cities. That's always what we say. We have these very strong cities that have a lot of agenda with having a reduction of private car usage. And this type of project can leverage on that. So many cities have this agenda to say, okay, let's have more public transport, more green areas, more place in the city and so on. And I think that's something we can really learn from all these cities. So that's something specific. And after, of course, yeah, we don't have maybe the big players like in US and China for automation, but there is a lot of also tier 1 suppliers that are still in Europe, at least, that can leverage on a lot of aspects. I mean, these shuttles, some shuttles manufacturers are still in France. So let's see how it goes in the future. But yeah.
Well, that's interesting that you said the focus of the cities, and maybe so the last thing that we can focus on is really kind of what do you see as being the consumer face of the show project? I mean, how will some of the innovations demonstrate themselves to citizens, and will they change behaviors? I'm curious what you think the reaction of city residents will be as you get into the project.
Yes, that's a great question. It's super central. And before coming back actually to your first question, when we mentioned, this diversity of stakeholders, we have also this very strong technique on one side, like a lot of technical development, but at the core of it, it's about enhancing the traveler's experience and the citizen. I'd like to tell about like quality of life in cities at the end. So that's a goal, very important, very central in the project. And what we expect is like, it will be very different because it's also what's great about Europe is this diversity that we have. So we are sure that we will have people who love it, people who hate it. That's good. We want to get any kind of feedback. But for now, the key from the project is we want to go out from this, all these trials, many trials for the moment have been launched for a couple of weeks in remote area, people trying this when they are on vacation, like tourists trying some, for fun. It's great, and I think it's very positive. But now we move really a step further in the project. So it is meant to be integrated in their everyday life. So at the end, what we hope is that people do not even notice it. That they just use the service, and that's all. Like you go in the metro, you are not asking yourself, will it start? You just go in the metro, in the subway. And we hope that it will be this type of service that we will get and feedback, so that at the end people say, it works, great, I like it.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, Henriette. This has been incredible, and we look forward to hearing back from you once the project launches. And
yes.
So we're going to actually push pause on this and go more to the business model side of it. And it's really interesting we ended up on this consumer-facing model, because our next speaker, Justin Coffey from Go Metro, is doing exactly that. And so we're going to jump from Europe to South Africa and welcome Justin, CEO of Go Metro. I've gotten to know Justin a lot in the last year because he's doing so many crazy stuff, and he's also working in the San Francisco Bay Area right now. So without further ado, Justin, thank you for spending a portion of your evening with us as well. We really appreciate it. Welcome.
Cool. Thanks, Billy. It's a real pleasure to be able to share our work with you guys this evening, and really focus on some of the results we've seen. So I've got a short video just to introduce our business and some of the impact we've had in the Global South. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen and connect my sound. And it'll just a 2.5-3 minute video clip, just to give you an idea of what we're doing at Go Metro. And then I'll dive a little bit into how we go about changing mobility for the better. So here goes. And
we're running out of space. We cannot continue on the car-dominated way that we have built cities since the 1950s. We need to invest in public transport as a society. Data is absolutely the fuel that drives change.
Some public transport is formal, like a bus that follows a schedule and arrives at each stop on time. Others are informal, where the route always changes and you can get on and off whenever you want. Like South Africa's minibus taxis, which account for nearly 70% of all public transport trips in the country in 2013.
In the informal sector, there is no requirement for adherence to safety, labour and other legislative norms. In fact, these are normally the ones that the industry sacrifices in order to be sustainable.
That's Justin Coetzee, whose startup Go Metro is using big data to help authorities begin to regulate informal public transport in South Africa.
There's an enormous amount of inefficiencies as to how these routes have sprung up and how they've been created over time. And so our data is able to consolidate them into a much more rational plan for the entire city to work better. So this map book is an example of work we've just finished for the city of Cape Town, where we rode every single taxi route in the city.
Go Metro begins by tracking things like route distance, number of stops, and when passengers get on and off. Then the company collate all that data into a model of the network. They then suggest changes to make and optimize the network more efficiently. Finally, the company deploys monitoring devices to make sure the network operators stick to the new plan.
We're standing here at the Caravel Lentegeur Taxi Association queue, or COLTA. So it's up to every passenger to decide where he wants to stop. Very inefficient because a driver will stop and start all the time.
What we found was that you're doing about 3,000 riders in the morning. Some of your operations are extending a little bit further than necessary for maybe 1 or 2 pickups. Yeah. So when we formalize, we're going to stop a lot of the special deliveries and the special door-to-doors.
100%.
Because that's wasting fuel.
Dead mileage.
Dead mileage. Yeah. Networks that we analyze, we think we can generally find between 30 and 50% efficiencies, either by introducing bigger vehicles, by changing the route, changing the schedules.
Transit systems across the world are looking to use big data to improve their services, and Go Metro now maps in Argentina, Kenya, Mexico, the USA, and India, to name but a few, helping less formal networks take steps towards official recognition.
Cool. So that's just a little bit about what we have done in Cape Town. And so we're very passionate at Go Metro about the invisible transport networks. I call it the invisible majority, because in the global south and most emerging economies, the network that carries the most people and then the transport network that is the majority share is pretty much invisible. It's informal, it's collectivized, and it's very difficult to engage with. So we've developed technologies that really focus on digitizing these operations, bringing them to the fore, and then taking the benefit of data analytics, telematics, payments, and automation into the lowest common denominator, which is that vehicle which moves around. And so our data forms a baseline for understanding what's going on at a vehicle level. And so we're now well equipped to start asking questions around electrification, connectivity, and eventual automation as we move towards autonomy and aided driving. So I'm just going to quickly pull up my slides and show you guys what we're doing and how we went about doing our network analytics. So in that project I showed you in Mitchell's Plain in South Africa, in Cape Town, we were able to reduce an operation by 50% in terms of its assets. We didn't lose any jobs because we moved to better shift systems, so we didn't have one job loss. And we were able to reduce fuel by 50%. So that's fuel and emissions dropped by 50%. And we did this without introducing any new subsidy, any new legislation, regulation, or even technology, just by using technology like data analytics. So it starts with putting a person in the vehicle to collect its daily trips and travel patterns. So we have a little application, a little mobile app called Go Metro Pro, and it's like Strava for informal minibus taxis. And as you drive and as you run up and down, it collects distance, passengers, revenue, travel time, waiting time, which is more important than travel time actually, and where this vehicle goes. So you end up with this footprint. I call it the fingerprint of a vehicle operation. So here we have a vehicle that did 23 trips in one day. It carried 232 passengers. It traveled for 191 kilometers. And its total travel time, moving time, was 9 hours in a 15-hour shift. So it ends up with 6 hours standing time. When you add all of this together, all these little bits of traces one by one into one big picture, you end up with what you see here, which is a map of boarding and lightings for 3 networks that share a common area. And you can start seeing all these overlaps. So the blue, the red, and the yellow are all different companies and operators, and they're competing for the passengers. So bringing them all together into one zone, one catchment area, and starting to help the vehicles not chase passengers, but cooperate in order to become efficient means that we can slowly but surely remove vehicles out of the network, reduce running kilometers, and increase, funnily enough, the frequency for customers so that they have more direct trips. We ended up in this particular project being able to produce for the first time regular routes and regular schedules for these operators to run. So they were able to run more frequent services, leave without the vehicle having to fill up, and increase their revenues while decreasing their total system operating kilometers. So you might have each vehicle doing 25% more kilometers, but if you're taking 50% of the vehicle fleet out, you have a net reduction in kilometers, a net reduction in emissions, and a net reduction in cost, like maintenance and so on. It doesn't always work this way. This is the informal market. So here's an example of our tracking system, our technology that kind of tries to enforce route adherence. And this trip failed because the driver drove the wrong way because he believed that the passengers were on that road and not that road. So we use data also to train drivers to let them see that there's a different way or a better way to do things, and slowly but surely, through a matter of months, work with the operators to get the operations to run more or less to the plan that we develop. Some of the other tools we've developed are around driver performance, driver scoring. So we have an incentivization where drivers can get paid a bit more if they're scoring green, not red. And we track things like pitch up to the depot on time, sign out your vehicle on time, return to the depot on time. So it's all these little bits and pieces that are normal to a bus operation. And we're helping these minibus collectives, operators, become mini bus companies through the use of some very straightforward management technologies. We're now working across South Africa on what we call the hybrid model. So this replaces bus rapid transit feeder services, which are generally very poor ridership, very low boardings per kilometer or boardings per hour, and they're generally albatrosses around the neck of BRT systems. So if you already have a flexible dynamic service, why not use that as your feeder service? So here in Pretoria, Tshwane, we're busy working on potential feeder routes that are more dynamic in operation. They don't run loops. They only move when there is demand along the way based on an app and on mobile phone requests. Here's another network where we have a trunk service which will run as a BRT, and these feeder services that run within neighborhoods, collecting up to 13 people at a time before dropping them off at the station. And here's another network where, again, we have different vehicles heading out, and then a trunk route which travels for about 40 minutes from Soshanguve into the center of Pretoria. So we're starting to see a new form of bus rapid transit, very different to what we've seen in Latin America and elsewhere, where you have your trunk solutions and your trunk services, but your feeder services are the collectives and the associations that are, rather than being displaced, are incorporated into the model and sharing an equitable part of operations. So the future of mobility in the Global South remains this form, but we're hoping that new electric vehicles, new technologies, and automation is going to play a role in bringing accessible mobility to everyone. That's what we do. We're doing this in multiple countries around the globe, and we are pretty much currently expanding, growing, hiring, and fundraising. So if our work interests you, please do get in touch.
That's awesome, Justin. Thank you so much, and a great intro into a company that's doing things I think that a little different, and it's fascinating to hear that you're focused on smaller cities in the Global South. And I think one thing that strikes me is that it seems like you're definitely providing a tool that professionalizes, but also creates an equity threshold from driver standpoint and from the transit operation standpoint. And one thing that I think it strikes me, and I think Hillary Nixon is also interested in this topic, is how you're building in service equity into some of your data models from the start. And I guess, is that something you're focused on? And is there room for building that into the consumer-facing side of autonomous vehicles as we see the vehicles evolve in the future?
Absolutely, yeah. So for these systems to survive and thrive and grow, then it needs to be a win-win-win-win. So the user has to get a better service, the owner has to make a bit more money, government needs to see that things are improving, and the driver especially needs to participate in the equation. So we really focus on ensuring that everybody gets better, gets more out of it, which is why optimization is where we started. So we're optimizing what's already there and then sharing more profits equitably. The consumer is generally, I mean, if you look at public transit and transit usage, it's women who do 2 or 3 times more trips than men, because guess who has to do the shopping, who has to go fetch the kids, who has to go visit the relatives and do the chores. It's women who take an emphasized role in a lot of activities outside of go to work, come back, and follow that commuting pattern. And so our work, by its very nature, increases gender equity, increases transparency in systems. And we find that particularly with regards to women in transport and using public transit, more than 80% when we survey in some of these cities do not feel safe using the system. Do not feel comfortable using the system. And so as we bring better management tools today with the technologies available today, we think that that's going to be able to have offshoots and benefits. We're working with the South African government on a user-based subsidy where the user can get pushed a voucher and the user chooses where he gets in. So rather than a supply-side subsidy and a kilometer subsidy and something that kind of rewards the operator, put the cash in the hands of the client or the customer to ensure that they choose with their wallet and choose with their feet. So that's unlocking value. And then we believe that electrification and autonomy are going to bring benefits to the operations as well as the operator, including the driver. So nobody really wants to drive a van for 15 hours a day, but it is an entry job in a economy. You come from the countryside, you come from out of town, you start as a driver and you work your way up. But everybody in the transport business is passionate about helping their community. And so rather than seeing displacement due to automation, which will be a long, long way away in a market such as the ones we work in, we do think that drivers have a role to play in the transport value chain beyond driving. When we move to electrification, there's going to be installation jobs. Someone has to put up the solar panels. Someone has to construct the infrastructure. Someone has to ensure the charge systems run through facilities management. So repurposing driver jobs, I think there are a million opportunities for us to take an equitable view around redistribution and reskilling.
You've hit on so many topics, and I think hopefully Hillary and I have a chance to come back to some of these because not only just kind of the impacts on women and the impacts on worker displacement. I love your lens on kind of this idea that autonomy may not be in the immediate future for you, but I'm assuming for a lot of your customers that advances in driver assist really will improve that. So if we think about ADAS systems as an intermediary, those are only going to improve the operational efficiency of what your drivers are doing. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So there's three things I worry about the most right now. One is electrification. So getting the right size battery vehicle with the range is where we're currently focused on bringing electric vehicles into this market, which is quite exciting. But that comes with challenges with regards to brake pad wear, tire wear, and a totally different maintenance regime to what we currently have with diesel and petrol vehicles. And so driver assist with regards to identifying and helping drivers drive more smoothly, not press on that brake or accelerate so hard, is going to have an opportunity to optimize. And then working with regards to collision detection systems, driver safety. Let's be clear. On Africa's roads, we still have 1 million too many road deaths a year than what we want to see. In emerging markets, and so I think there's a huge role in driver assist and driver safety technologies to play in the public transit sector to reduce road deaths and road accidents.
Fantastic. Well, there's more that I would love to scratch the surface on here, including I think what's embedded in your stuff in terms of just distributed ownership models, which I think you referenced, but we don't have time for today. So we'll have to come back, Justin, and do a little more discussion later on. But I really thank you for spending some of your evening with us, and hopefully all of us can maybe see you over in the States or in Africa or in maybe Henriette will have us all at the Brussels here pretty soon. So thank you for your time this evening. Very appreciative.
Thanks.
So with that, thank you, Justin. We're going to take a little short break. Don't go away. It's going to be about 2 minutes. And then we're going to jump about 3 time zones back to the US and hear from a colleague, Ellie Machek in Cambridge, Mass. So we'll take a couple-minute break and be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back. Hope everybody refilled their coffee or wherever you are, whatever beverage you have in hand. We were really excited to keep this amazing session going with Ellie Mechek from the Volpe Center, helping innovate U.S. transportation systems, and has been involved with a number of innovative projects dealing with automated and autonomous driving in the U.S. From Cambridge, Massachusetts. Would love to welcome Ellie. Thank you so much, and nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Should I go ahead and pull up the slides?
Go for it.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me. Like everyone else, I'm gonna have this 3-second pause while I make sure I actually get the slide deck up and running. All right, as Billy mentioned, I'm Ellie Mechek. I'm with the Volpe Center. Volpe is part of the US Department of Transportation, and we are based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. So today I'm gonna take just a slice of the pie and talk about transit bus automation and accessibility. And I think that ties in really nicely with the two themes that Hillary gave us at the outset, climate and equity. One thing I should mention for context, the Biden-Harris administration has the Justice 40 initiative, and that aims to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of federal investments in climate and sustainable transportation to disadvantaged communities. So that's very relevant to today's conversation, and we've got a lot more information about that up on the department's website. So I'm with DOT, but I'm not representing any official positions today. I'm just speaking from my experience and my personal opinions. So very quickly, I'm going to introduce you to where we are with transit bus automation in the United States. And it's broad. You know, there's a lot of interest in automation from across the transportation sector, and the transit industry is no different. But where we are in deployment and research and adoption is maybe a little bit different. We do see projects being sponsored by a wide range of actors. There's a lot of experimentation from the private sector, more in kind of the ride hailing and automated taxi side of the house, but also some partnering with local circulators and feeders. We saw with economic development agencies and nonprofit organizations in this space as well. Kind of one of the big trends we've seen, particularly in the last 5-6 years, is that the early projects were really struggling to understand what federal regulations were relevant to their work and how to comply with them. And there's definitely been some improvement there, but it remains challenging, particularly if you're using federal money. So, and I say challenging, but you know, we're happy to provide information on ways that you can meet those regulations and comply. But overall, big picture, the US transit industry is fairly risk averse. You know, they have a lot of front and center problems in front of them today. You know, transit has been hit very, very hard by COVID-19. There's a lot of workforce issues. There are staffing shortages. You know, there are longstanding problems dealing with congestion in urban areas and also serving rural areas. So automation is of interest, but agencies don't always have the ability to jump right into it. And finally, we see that the maturity of the technology does tend to lag popular perception, and getting some of these services out in mixed traffic, serving a wide range of passengers is still kind of difficult. So there are a lot of different concepts being explored. And when I talk about transit bus automation, I'm talking about all of these ideas and more than these ideas. So we're not just talking about a 40-foot transit bus, very open to what this could mean in the future. I mean, the main thing is that it would be a vehicle used in public transportation with the ability to share. FDA has taken a strategic approach into programming automation research. In 2018, we published the Strategic Transit Automation Research Plan. It establishes the R&D framework for the agency, and it sets up a series of research projects, demonstrations exploring many different facets, strategic partnerships where we reach out to work that others are doing, add a little bit of funding to help them publicize their findings or do more data analysis, and then a series of stakeholder engagement and knowledge transfer activities. And if you're interested in taking a look at the plan, it's up at the link there. This map shows it's a little tricky, the transit bus automation related projects that have some DOT funding. So it's not just funded by FTA and it's not just transit bus automation, but it's kind of a range. But these projects all have some component of shared mobility and automation in them. For folks, I think most of you are on the West Coast, so hopefully you're familiar with some of these demonstrations. Some of the others I might highlight would be University of Iowa. They have an automated driving systems demonstration grant, and they're using that to focus on human factors and user acceptance, particularly for seniors. City of Arlington, Texas has an existing on-demand mobility program, and they've added an automated component to that. They have 6 vehicles in the fleet at level 4 automation, one of which is wheelchair accessible, and you can order those through your app. The Connecticut Department of Transportation has an automated bus rapid transit project. That's still in the early stages, but it's going to be operating on their CT fast track right of way. So they have some dedicated guideway, I think 11 stations. Okay, so there's our quick whirlwind tour of transit automation. I know I'd like to focus on accessibility. So we were so excited at the start of the year. The Access Board convened this webinar series on inclusive design. Maybe folks are already aware of it, and if not, they've archived all the slides and materials on their website. And the Secretary gave a statement about the importance of accessibility. So what does it really mean for an automated vehicle? And I always say this in these contexts, please remember that the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to automated vehicles. There's no exception for automated vehicles. And it is a lot more than ramps and lifts, although ramps and lifts are one of the most visible components of the problem. There are diverse user needs. There are people with cognitive impairments, sensory impairments, mobility impairments, combinations of these. They're not always visible. Interaction with the technology, the human-machine interface can be very challenging depending on the person and the system design. And there's a lot that onboard personnel do in today's staffed services that is pretty challenging to try to automate. It's not, you can't solve every problem easily with technology. So FTA does have some policy frequently asked questions up on the website. And I've also provided a link to the straightforward guidance we have on the ADA if you need more information there. So where are we today? Overall, I would say that progress is definitely being made. Some of the early demonstrations didn't have ramps, or maybe they had a manual ramp that didn't actually, meet the accessibility standards. Now we're starting to see some with integrated ramps, or at least a compliant manual ramp. But that's not all you need. You also need securements, you need a safety belt, you need audible announcements. And those can certainly be made by a human operator today, and they often are in the demonstrations because they're all currently staffed. So we see a lot of testing of different approaches underway. It's kind of a let a thousand flowers bloom type of approach. And so it's exciting to see energy and enthusiasm in this area because we really believe in the potential of automation to improve mobility for everybody. There's research underway. I've highlighted a couple of the DOT funded projects here, but DOT is certainly not the only actor. The University Transportation Center's program has a center focused around this topic, the Aspire Center. The ITS for Us program has a project in Buffalo, Niagara, which includes an automated accessible shuttle. NITS has been working with Tree on something called Universal Docking Interface Geometry, which is a stepping stone towards something that could be standardized in the future. And many of the FTA pilots and demonstrations include an accessibility research component. But there are a lot of challenges, particularly for the novel design shuttles. They have small vehicle sizes, so transporting a wheelchair passenger does reduce the capacity. The interior turning radius is not that big, so it may be compliant with ADA, but it's still challenging for someone in some of the larger mobility devices to turn around. Even little things like the capability of the batteries and the HVAC systems. If you need to install a manual ramp and get someone boarded and secured and you have the doors open for a long time, you may lose all your heating or cooling, and that does have an impact on battery life. And then there are a lot of questions around Is unstaffed service something that would make sense in the future? Is it even possible to have an unstaffed service and be accessible? It's an unanswered question. You know, when we do passenger surveys, we find one of the most common things we hear, people love interacting with the attendant on the shuttle. So if your business model includes removing an attendant from the shuttle, what does that mean for your user acceptance? And there are a lot of things that the human operator does today to assist passengers with disabilities. I want to quickly mention DOT's Inclusive Design Challenge. It's a $5 million prize competition. You see here the 10 semi-finalists who were all selected in phase 1, and they're all working on their technical prototypes with an eye towards phase 2 happening in 2022. And with that, I think I'm ready for questions.
Thanks, Ellie. That's fantastic. Appreciate this. And once people get your email for all the questions they're going to have for you offline, we can
I'll talk to anybody.
Unshare. Yeah. Well, I think one thing, maybe we can unshare the screen so I can see more of you. But it's really awesome. And I should fully disclose that I actually Mineta Transportation Institute and myself and an academic from Cal Poly have actually worked on one of these accessibility projects. And I love that you are focused on kind of opportunities to reinvent the vehicle, and that the Secretary Buttigieg is really behind this. It's actually really fantastic. Maybe I think I'd love to rewind and just ask you, user acceptance. Are there lessons to be learned from the acceptable autonomous vehicle initiatives about user acceptance? Not only of automated vehicles, but just this idea of mobility as a service and mobility platforms.
Sure, it's a big question, and I'm only qualified to answer a small part of it. So I'll give you a couple anecdotes. We really, time and time again, when you read the sort of free response comments on the user surveys, people are talking about their interaction with the attendant on the vehicle. And these are for projects targeting general population, as well as those targeting folks who have some kind of disability or seniors, or, a group of some particular kind. And so, it's an open question. We're doing a great job with the current demonstrations in showcasing the technology and explaining the technology, but what does that mean? I know there are projects around the world where we're starting to see kind of driver out, operator out tests, and I think we'll learn a lot from those. But there are some unanswered questions right now.
Yeah, it's funny, as you were saying that, I was thinking, maybe there's, we have heard in this past from a lot of people in the robotics space, and it's almost like we need to figure out how we keep the human aspects of the vehicle. And the question is there a technology fix for that? And
nobody knows. I will refer the very interested reader to Appendix C of the STAR plan. It is my favorite appendix of all the appendices I have ever appended to a document. I would like to recommend it. And we worked with some folks who had experience in bus operations and going through and cataloging all of the non-driving responsibilities of a bus operator. And there are many of them. So it's organized by trip phase. And it's just a starting point, but the folks who are really interested in this space, we're hoping that it gives you a little boost to thinking about, which ones of these are easy to solve with technology and which ones are challenging, and how much does that matter?
That's really, so Appendix C of the STAR plan is what you're suggesting we all read. Maybe one more question, Ellie. I think there was a lot to absorb here, and I do think you are qualified because you are in this position at Volpe where you absorb so much, and you're just this wealth of information. So please, your modesty, you're far too modest. But one of the things that I think is really important for this audience to absorb is really just what are the operational and/or business models that you're seeing that particularly will improve service across the spectrum. And you focus a little bit on the kind of the accessible autonomous vehicles, but are there certain operational models that you're seeing percolate up from the research that really seem to be the sweet spot from a business standpoint? Sure,
that's a great question. And I don't, I'm not a business analyst. My degree is in city planning, right? So take this with a large grain of salt. We're seeing so much investment in freight right now, and supply chain and freight, they're very much in the national conversation, and that may be contributing to it, but we really saw this starting pre-pandemic. A lot of the news headlines focus on passenger transportation because I think that's very accessible for people. It catches their imagination. But realistically, having passenger transportation, you're going to be operating a passenger service. And when you talk to folks who work in the tech industry, they know a lot about their technology, but maybe not a lot about customer service. And they're two very different skill sets. So sometimes starting with freight may be an easier lift for them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the hidden undercurrent that we haven't talked about that much. And, just so one data point we have is at our same conference last year, we had Sven Wolf from Booth, Booth operates basically electric tuk-tuks in Stockholm, and basically had to restructure this past year as a result of the pandemic, and has basically rebuilt the business wholly on this last mile delivery model and doing it like a fairly carbonless delivery model. And so if folks remember, Booth, the strangely named, interesting and quirky Swedish company. So look them up. They had a really interesting pivot from passenger transport to logistics over the last year.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit, I think there's a lot of potential for passenger transportation. I just don't know that you're going to make your millions in it right away. So we're really hopeful for safety, improving driver workload, all of those things.
And that was not said because you're not a financial analyst. You cannot invest according to Ellie.
Please don't.
Ellie, your modesty is too much. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And hopefully have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. And we're going to pivot now back to the private sector and welcome a really interesting and fascinating CEO, Sahas Kala from SmartCar. I got a chance to meet Sahas from a friend in the insurance industry, Rob Bauer, who we've actually hosted before, and was interested in automated insurance, and was a part of a team that invested in Sahas' company. Sahas, so happy to have you here, and so interested in your model of this platform approach to the vehicle, and really just to catch you up, it was really been an interesting conversation where we've spanned ADAS to autonomy, and really interested in your perspective and what you're bringing to the market and how that actually can shape consumers as well as vehicles in the future.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Billy, thanks so much for having me. And it's great to be part of this autonomous vehicle symposium. I'm actually going to share my screen here, and I'll walk you all through a little bit about our story at SmartCar and what we're doing to kind of help accelerate mobility forward through some of the work we're doing in the infrastructure space. So as a quick context, SmartCar is an API for cars. We are a startup based in Mountain View, California. We were founded in 2015, and we are backed by Andreessen Horowitz and New Enterprise Associates, who are two different venture capital firms in Menlo Park. And what I can do today is walk you a little bit through what SmartCar is and what we do and what problem we're solving. And from here, we can walk over through how different DOTs are utilizing the SmartCar technology to accelerate some of the different programs and initiatives that they're pursuing. So going back to our starting mission statement at SmartCar, our goal at SmartCar has been from day one to really empower developers to build the future mobility. And what we've done is really provide a set of really friendly APIs that software developers within mobility companies can utilize to connect their apps to cars. And we are now serving a variety of different industries, from companies that are building car sharing products, pay by the mile insurance products, smart EV charging products, and of course, even road usage charge programs, which I'll talk a little bit more about on the infrastructure side of things as we progress through this slides. And one of the reasons we started the company, actually, I started the company with my brother, who's our CTO, and I'm the CEO. And the reason we started it was we were actually software developers trying to go build an app for our own vehicle. And it turned out that this was really hard to do. most car brands, which we discovered quite quickly, did not really offer us as software developers a friendly developer experience. They didn't have API documentation published. There were no SDKs. There wasn't a way to talk to their customer support. There were no API keys. And even if maybe one of them were to give us access to their APIs, it still meant we had to repeat that challenge or problem for another 30 brands. And that's when we got that aha moment that there's this fundamental gap in the automotive industry that's preventing mobility from moving forward faster. So we decided to solve this by building a standard API for cars. Today, the Smart Car API is compatible with 22 different vehicle brands, all the logos that you see on the left. And on the right, we make it easy to get telemetry from these vehicles, such as a car's fuel tank level, its odometer reading, its location. If it's an electric car, its battery level or its charging status. And you can even send commands back to these cars to lock or unlock the doors. And what's really exciting about this new technology is that through entirely just a couple lines of code on your computer, you're able to unlock the car in your driveway by sending a couple lines of code on your terminal. You can have a Ford F-150 in your driveway that you just brought home from a dealership without needing to modify it in any way, without needing to install any aftermarket hardware, without needing to tweak it. You're able to use our technology to get its location, its fuel tank level, unlock the doors. And today, there's now 72 million cars that are on the road in the United States, roughly 1 in 3 cars in the United States that are compatible with the Smart Car API out of the box. And this has started to create a massive ecosystem of connected services or applications around vehicles that weren't really possible before due to the fact of the platform now becoming available. And in addition to standardizing these APIs and making it really easy to integrate with cars, we also had to take a stab at also standardizing consent management. It was really important for us from day one to enable consumers to have control of what applications they want to use, what they want to connect their car to, and understanding the scope of permissions that they're going to be sharing with their the application they use. So for instance, if you want to go sign up for a pay-by-the-mile insurance product, you may want to be able to connect your car to that insurance provider and share just your mileage, but you don't want them to be able to get your location or your fuel tank level. So we've built this technology that has now made this possible. And today consumers are able to stay in control of who they're sharing and what scope of information that they're sharing with that third-party application. And fast forward to what this has resulted in is kind of exciting as well. So when we started the company, again, we started off as software developers trying to go build an app for a car. But within a few months of starting the company, the state of California Department of Transportation ended up putting out a pilot program to start evaluating how to tax drivers as the world moves to electric vehicles. And the state of California actually became one of our very first customers, which is really rare for a venture-backed startup. And the reason for this was today states rely on the gasoline tax or fuel tax to fund building and maintaining infrastructure like roads, bridges, et cetera. And as cars are becoming increasingly fuel efficient or hybrid or purely electric, they're no longer really contributing to the roads that they drive on. There isn't a way to collect funds from them. So a couple of years ago, Jerry Brown had taken that first initiative to say, hey, let's figure out evaluating ways to solve this problem. And Smart Car was included in that pilot, and the state enrolled hundreds of drivers in California through our technology to get odometer readings from them to be able to then tax them based on the number of miles they drive, which they felt would be a new equitable system. And fast forward a few years, and this technology is now in use actually in production in some states like Utah, which we're incredibly excited about. And what we're excited about is the fact that without the need for expensive hardware needing to be put into cars, without needing to have someone bring their car into the DMV once a year, without someone needing to go through a very painful process, the state of Utah, for instance, is able to now, with consumers opt in a few clicks, share their digital odometer reading directly from their car in about 2-3 clicks from a mobile app or from a website, and invoice them for the miles they've driven. And this new taxation system is something that we're excited about because it's very equitable. It's really tied to the usage of the roads, not to the fuel source that your car runs on, and encompasses eventually all kinds of drivers, whether the car is a hybrid, a fuel cell, an electric, or just happens to continue to be a gas vehicle. And this is an important necessity as we look ahead into the next 5 to 10 years, as the inevitable transition that we'll need to make away from the gasoline tax to a miles-based taxation system. And due to the fact that it's entirely a software-based solution, we've been really excited about the fact that we're able to keep that administration cost incredibly low for the state DOTs. And with very low administration costs, every dollar collected in taxes is able to go back to actual infrastructure needs, as opposed to administrative technologies to collect that tax revenue. This actual screenshot is some of the examples of the product that's live in Utah today. Our tolling partner implemented for the state of Utah, and from a web page on the Utah Department of Transportation's website or on a mobile device, you're able to select your car brand, whether it's a Tesla or any other vehicle, connect your car by typing in your credentials, and then hitting the accept permissions button to share your mileage with the state. And that's a 3-click process, and that enables the state to collect your odometer information. And at the end of the day, I think this is one example of how smart car is being utilized. And I didn't touch on all other subjects, but we're excited today to be powering a variety of other mobility use cases in addition to road usage charge. If you ever rent a car on a platform like Turo, and from the Turo app, you hit the unlock button in the app to the car you just rented. That's our technology you probably used that enabled that car's doors to get unlocked. Again, if you are paying for insurance by the mile from one of the new innovative insurance providers, there's a good chance that our mileage technology is enabling your insurance company to get the mileage of how much you drove your vehicle. And actually in the San Francisco Bay Area, if you live in San Mateo County or in the South Bay in Santa Clara County, and you have an electric vehicle, your utility is likely offering a smart charging program where if you pause your car's charging during peak hours and allow it to charge during off-peak hours, typically midnight or later, they're actually giving you cheaper electric rates. And you can actually save as much as 50% on charging your EV by opting into this program. And our technology is also powering that program, which enables the shift to electric vehicles to happen more quickly. It enables balancing the grid, reducing demand from peak hours, and consumers get the benefits of having really cheap electricity delivered to their car when there are surpluses available. So we're really excited about the future mobility at Smart Car. And we're excited to have this kind of underlying quiet role behind the scenes, providing this infrastructure layer that other amazing companies are able to go build on. And we're excited to be here today as part of this conversation around autonomous vehicles mobility. And if there are any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, but you're always welcome to go visit our website at smartcar.com. And we also always have a lot of openings. So if anyone's interested in being part of our journey and story, feel free to reach out and we're happy to chat. Thanks,
Sahas. That was amazing. And I'll be totally honest with when I first met Sahas, and I want to see what appreciate when people go to the website after, but we'd love to see more of your face. So no need to keep the share up. But you blew me away first time we met. It just kind of harnessing a lot of the benefits of automation today, and really thinking about vehicles as a platform. And I think, when you scratch the surface, and a couple of years ago we had a mobile mechanic service that came and did one of these presentations for our students, and they were really basing this on a lot of your fledgling technology at the time, and whether or not it's EV charging or maybe a future of digital licensing or registration. It's really a lot of fascinating possibilities. But one thing I wanted to ask you was this idea of, you mentioned consumer privacy, and I think that's a really important point. And it's also a really important point where I think that you're really trying to repair a lot of trust that's been broken. And so, how can your company at the edge of this trend towards sharing kind of more and more private data kind of help rebuild trust in government, but also tech?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really great point. And I think the automotive industry, unfortunately, I'd say for a couple of years had gone down a path where they felt selling and monetizing vehicle data was the right thing to do because it was tied to profits. And I think we've started to see them evolve away from that thinking. And we've been one of the leading forces of pushing people away from aggregating, anonymizing, or bulk selling people's data. What we rather believe is that if you own a car and how you drive that car, where you drive that car, how your car is performing, that's your information. It's not something that Smart Car should have access to, or any third party like your insurance company or car rental company. No one should ever have access to this. But what we do believe is that you should have the ability to choose to use the applications you want. And just like when you install an application on your smartphone, it may ask you, I want permission to your location, and you can choose to give it access to that, or to your camera roll or your contact lists. And it's the same thing for cars, in our opinion. Your insurance company shouldn't be able to just come by some information about your driving habits without your involvement or understanding. But if you voluntarily choose that, hey, I may get a better rate, so I'm fine sharing just my odometer reading value with my insurance company, and you have that transparency, you have that control, that's the right decision. And that's the right way, in our opinion, to tackle this problem. And even a lot of the DOTs, to touch on the government side of things, have started to be really evolving their opinions on this. There were some early initiatives where a lot of state DOTs initially wanted to put a GPS tracking device in everyone's cars. And that's obviously something that I even personally would not feel comfortable with happening, if knowing that, the DMV or DOT knows where I'm driving every single moment of the day. But when that thinking evolved and they realized, what is the bare minimum we need to be able to ensure at a low cost with minimal invasiveness of privacy, and what is essentially required to also make sure there's no fraud or tampering happening to be able to equitably tax people for how much they drive, that ended up getting something like the odometer reading, just a differential between the first day of the month and the end of the month. So maybe 1 or 2 data points from your vehicle every month. And when a lot of the states went and did surveys with residents in their state, they found that people, when they understood this, were really comfortable with the fact that, hey, it's just maybe a value like 400 miles that's being shared, and I am okay sharing that piece of information with my state. So it's a mix of being thoughtful, talking to people who are going to be using your product, and making sure you execute on only utilizing data when it's absolutely required.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sahas. And that really, I think this audience also really, gets this idea of how do we pay for infrastructure when we get to this future of carbonless commuting, and let's just say carbonless congestion. So then how do we actually mitigate congestion in those situations? And some of what you're talking about is maybe experimenting with the lever, or, we talk a lot of push and pull factors that can be used to maybe pay for that, but also drive behavior a little bit. But one question, and maybe this can be the last question, is really just kind of, you mentioned your partnership with Turo, and I think that's for particularly as we think about automation and a transition to fleet-based services. What do you feel like the lane for your company is, really as we see more and more fleet-based on-demand services going forward?
Yeah, I think we're seeing an exciting transformation in the shared economy space, and I think one of the big challenges that operating any type of logistics service of that sort is that there's a lot of still hand or manual operations involved. A vehicle owner, a lot of them who are small business owners, a lot of immigrant families who buy a couple cars and rent them out on the platform. And that's their livelihood, that's their business, maintaining these cars, cleaning these cars, and making sure guests who rent them are able to get them in a clean, safe state. And a lot of the times, a lot of these businesses have struggled to scale. They need to be in 3 places at once. Someone is wanting to rent a car in San Jose at the same time someone's dropping one off in Mountain View. So what has happened is that with digital technology and these connected car APIs, the renter can unlock the door from a smartphone app. They don't need to be there for that initial exchange. And when the car is returned, they're able to automatically pull the mileage and the fuel tank level to charge them if they didn't fill up the tank. They don't need to be there to return the car either. And when the cleaners, as you talked about earlier, mechanics, they can send someone virtually to one of their vehicles, and that cleaning or mechanic service is able to unlock the doors and service that car without, again, a human being needing to be there from the vehicle operator side. So it's enabled a lot of these small business entrepreneurs who have become providers of mini car rental fleets on these car sharing platforms to have much more efficient, successful, safe businesses. And at the end of the day, renters are benefiting from cars that are now more affordable, that are cheaper and better maintained as a result of this. So we're seeing technology playing a huge role in just enabling people to have more equitable, affordable, safe access to transportation.
That's great, and we know just from transportation theory that when you don't own a vehicle, you're probably going to drive less. So that's actually really an important feature. And one thing I want to connect that you said, Sahas, to what Justin from South Africa said when he got on is you really are exploring these new ownership models. And in his work in the global South, this has a lot of applicability because you may have vehicles that have disaggregated ownership. So it's a really important point, and I really appreciate you bringing that up and highlighting that as part of that question. I think we're about out of time, so I just want to thank you for ending us off here. Really appreciate your time and wish you the best as you continue to scale your company. It's a really fascinating model and doing really important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna take it back here, and what I'd like to do, I've invited Hillary Nixon from the Minetta Transportation Institute, and Sahas, she'd been really fascinated and asked me a ton of questions about what you were doing, because one of the things that we talk about in the planning profession is, well, how do we pay for all this? How do we actually get to this future of mobility like running water? And so, Hillary, I'd love to have your thoughts about kind of the future of sustainability in cities, and how do we go carbon free, but also do it in a just way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Billy. And really, first off, I want to thank each of the presenters today. They were outstanding presentations, and the work that you're all doing is truly inspiring and thought-provoking as we continue our march towards our mobility future. So Billy and I had talked earlier this week, and I wanted to bring this back to the questions that I posed at the start of this event to help frame the conversation and take a couple of minutes just to expand on that framework as we're wrapping up today. So how can we advance social equity in an autonomous vehicle world, and how can autonomous mobility be a catalyst for achieving sustainability in the transportation sector? So jumping back 100 years, in the early 20th century, we ushered in the age of the automobile. We responded by transforming our cities to accommodate this new technology, and forgot that first and foremost, we need to plan our cities for people. We have an opportunity now, 100 years later. I went and checked on kind of Ford and automation and his assembly line process, and it was right there about 100 years ago. And we have this opportunity to re-envision our urban environments and to create places for people and ensure that the advances in automotive technology today and in the future are implemented to reap the benefits for all while minimizing harm. I was recently reading, it was the NACTO, or the National Association for City Transportation Officials, their blueprint for an autonomous urbanism. And they used a phrase that I really liked, Billy. It was a human-focused autonomous future. So we've heard some presentations today, particularly about different models. And autonomous vehicles have this potential to become a radically different model of ownership. So what happens to our cities, our homes, our travel patterns, if instead of owning a vehicle outright, we own access to a shared fleet, some model like that? So Henrietta walked us through show and plans for a demonstration of that shared AV fleet in Europe and how that might work. And we've certainly seen some of the potential negative impacts with the current rideshare models that led to increased VMT, urban congestion, siphoning wealthier riders from transit, as well as service gaps for some communities. And so learning from those experiences, as well as demonstration projects like SHOW, will help ensure that future broader implementation can avoid those concerns. As Ellie noted, the COVID-19 pandemic was a shock to the transit system. Ridership rates plummeted, particularly among so-called choice riders. And this led to drastic service cuts that left our most vulnerable riders literally out in the cold. But I think several of our presenters today reminded us that transit is still going to be an important component in our urban environments. They move large numbers of people safely and efficiently. So Justin walked us through how big data can be used to increase operational efficiencies for informal transit. And then as Ellie discussed in her presentation, traditional transit systems themselves are going to benefit from the development of autonomous technology, which can then be incorporated into new bus designs, operations, things like that. And then there's opportunities for how we integrate our transit system with other autonomous vehicle modes, such as shuttles or shared vehicles. Topic near and dear to my heart, transportation finance. Sahas, I was just glowing throughout your presentation, but this is a really important piece of this conversation. And a great deal of the funding today to invest in developing new AV technology or piloting infrastructure is coming either from industry, startups, Sahas mentioned his venture capitalists, or government grants, like as those Ellie mentioned. But that's not going to get us all the way there or support the long-term financial sustainability of these systems. So how can we create a pricing framework that encourages high occupancy, high efficiency, sustainable models, disincentivize single occupancy, low efficiency models? Can we look for pricing strategies that reduce VMT, minimize congestion, manage curbside activity? Sahas, you talked about road user chargers, which is certainly an area that MTI has done a fair amount of research in when we think about implementation models, revenue impacts, as well as public opinion. But also, and I know that we're getting close to the end here, but I'm so excited about all of this. But what are some of the finance mechanisms that could address potential inequities? Could funds raised from, for example, pricing curbside activity be used to reduce shared mobility costs for low-income users? Are there public-private partnership models in an autonomous future that could finance the development of technology and the needed infrastructure under a framework that places equity and sustainability at the heart? And then probably kind of my last piece, if you'll bear with me just another second. We've talked a little bit, Henrietta brought up regulations and regulatory challenges that they're facing in the EU. In the US, I heard a presentation from Volpe the other day. 29 states have enacted legislation, several others have executive orders, but we don't have consistency. So that makes it challenging for industry to plan and develop for the future. But there are incredibly important reasons why cities, local governments need to be at the table during these policy and regulatory discussions. So it starts to bring with us an opportunity for the public and private sector at all levels to frame the policy discussion, think about ways to incentivize a greater emphasis on equity and sustainability, and that we're not just talking about a minor shift in our policies. We need transformative public policies, ones that not only think about the regulations and policies that are focused directly on the technology or AVs and infrastructure, but complementary ones. Land use policies. If we've got land use policies that are facilitating in some way, shape, or another low density development, that's just going to lead to more congestion, more pollution, even if people aren't behind the wheel of the car. So as we look to the future, it's important to recognize that AV technology is a tool, and it's how we utilize that tool that really matters. How we use our values, our priorities to drive the development and implementation of autonomous technology in the coming years are going to be the legacy that we lead to future generations. Billy, thank you. I know I probably talked longer than you wanted, but it's a topic near and dear to my heart.
I think all of us are blown away. This dialogue keeps getting better. And so I want to appreciate you for your kind of concluding thoughts, so that you brought together everything that happened. And I think I was equally inspired. So, I think I just want to wrap up, because you encapsulated everything in a way that I think really hit on the highlights. And I think, focused on the human space, but also the space for collaboration. And that's what I've always envisioned that this event was, this space where we can have those complex dialogues between government and between the private sector, and really work towards these optimal outcomes. So with that said, I just want to again thank all the speakers. Thanks to Dean Moses. Thanks to Atmos for your generous sponsorship. We really would encourage you to take a look, and we benefit when you take a look and consider signing up on their banking platform. This is not going to end. Every year I think, oh, this dialogue is stale, it's over. We hope to welcome folks back next year on site at University of San Francisco or at the Commonwealth Club. So look forward to welcome you back in person. Stay safe, everyone. Get vaccinated, and we will see you soon. I'm Billy Riggs, and thanks for attending today.